Oftentimes, Brian comes into work, he's got two neckties, doesn't know which one to read, to wear. So we were reading some of your email regarding your choice.
Yeah, my nighttime choice doesn't agree with my morning choice, so often I'm conflicted, and I come in with this in my one in my pocket.
All right, so Charles says you need to get some ties with the red, white, and blue on them. They go with everything.
Okay. And then Josh writes, Brian's blue tie looks perfect. Definitely a better choice than the red for him. Also, the glasses look great on Steve.
I think we should do a survey every single morning. You put two ties up, and then the audience decides.
So what did Instagram say?
Instagram is pretty much tied right now.
Oh, the red.
It's tied.
Come on.
All right, see you tomorrow.
No guts. Morning, everybody. Breaking news this hour. Stinging new reaction only moments ago from the White House. This after a federal judge temporarily blocking President Trump's decision to end the Dreamers program in the month of March. That move coming hours after reporters and the American public were given this live, unfiltered access to an hour-long meeting between the president and lawmakers from both sides. Fascinating stuff. Good morning, everybody. What has changed, however? I'm Bill Hemmer, live inside of America's Newsroom. Good morning.
What a meeting that was, by the way.
Yes.
All right, I'm Sandra Smith. Good morning, everyone. The White House calling the move by a San Francisco judge outrageous as the president worked to negotiate what he's calling a bill of love to protect those dreamers and secure the border. In an hour-long meeting on immigration reform, the art of the deal was on full display as the president listened and negotiated, all in front of those TV cameras.
I'm appealing to everyone in the room to put the country before a party and to sit down and negotiate and to compromise, and let's see if we can get something done. I feel having the Democrats in with us is absolutely vital because this should be a bipartisan bill. This should be a bill of love.
There's not a Democrat that is not for having secure borders. There are obviously differences, however, Mr. President, on how you affect that.
When we talk about just DACA, we don't want to be back here 2 years later. You have to have security.
In a matter of days, literally of days, we can come together and reach an agreement. And when that happens, I think good things will happen in other places.
There should be no reason for us not to get this done.
White House correspondent Kevin Corke is live for us from the North Lawn of the White House this morning. Kevin, some fascinating exchanges in that meeting yesterday. So what came out of all of that?
Okay, listen, the White House will tell you, Sandra, this process has to be linear, right? Point A, security and funding for the wall. Then point B, dealing with DACA. But as for the ruling out of California, they say this is really par for the course. You sort of judge shop or maybe find a judge who then halts a policy temporarily, and then it's off to court. And that looks like that's going to be the process once again. But this time it really seems to have struck a chord here at the White House. Bill mentioned a new statement from the White House reacting just moments ago. Sarah Sanders telling us in a statement which reads in part, this one says, we find this decision to be outrageous, especially in light of the president's successful bipartisan meeting with House and Senate members at the White House on the same day. An issue of this magnitude must go through the normal legislative process. Now, that meeting yesterday, as you said, were really riveting theater, an insider's view of the sausage making, the process, which, by the way, continues to play out in real time. Meanwhile, White House officials don't appear very worried about this latest court ruling out of California.
The Ninth Circuit, as you know, is consumed of a bunch of very liberal left-wing judges in San Francisco. They have continually been overruled at higher courts, just as they were with the travel ban. We would expect the same scenario to unfold with this, and so this is more just a distraction. We will continue to move forward in looking for a solution and a legislative fix to DACA.
Yeah, Devin O'Malley from Justice calling it an unlawful circumvention of Congress, one that they will continue to fight in court, Sandra.
And Kevin, a new twist in this Fusion GPS story this morning, this one involving multiple lawsuits filed by the president's lawyers. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, listen, I've actually got a copy of the complaint right here. Michael Cohen, longtime confidant of the president and his attorney, frankly is saying enough is enough. He is suing both BuzzFeed and others who have perpetrated, as he puts it, an injustice to the president. He's talking about the popular website BuzzFeed, and in this both cases, he claims that the infamous dossier that we've all been talking about contained false and defamatory allegations that resulted in, quote, harm to the president's reputation, business interests, and opportunities. Now, Tuesday night, Cohen actually tweeted, "Enough is enough." of the fake Russian dossier. In fact, he names several defendants in that lawsuit, among them, as I pointed out, BuzzFeed. In case you're wondering, yep, they're talking about it. They've issued a statement. This one we can share part of. This is not the first time Trump's personal lawyer has attacked the free press, and we look forward to defending our First Amendment rights in court. Now, the White House, for its part, has frankly steered clear of the suit, but they do acknowledge on background that the president's private attorneys could certainly ramp up attacks on the dossier and those who decided to publish its unverified material. Now, you may be wondering, will we hear from the president today? Yes, leader of Norway here at the White House. No press briefing. We'll hear from the commander-in-chief himself sometime after 3:20. We'll bring that to you, but for now, back to you.
We will look forward to that. Kevin Cork, thank you.
For more on this, and there's a lot on this too, Jonathan Swan, national reporter for Axios. And Jonathan, welcome to America's Newsroom, and good morning to you in Washington, D.C. Play a quick clip. I think the key line in here is, I'll take the heat. Here's what was said.
You have created an opportunity here, Mr. President, and you need to close the deal.
I'll take the heat. I don't care. I don't care. I'll take all the heat you want to give me. And I'll take the heat off both the Democrats and the Republicans. My whole life has been heat. I like heat in a certain way.
We know that to be true. What does it mean, I'll take the heat? Is he going to give these guys cover on both sides?
Well, it's a very interesting psychological insight into Trump, because he's basically spent his whole life in some form of litigation or other. And, you know, you hear reports in the news about when crises happen in the White House that Trump is melting down. I actually often hear the exact opposite, which is that he's remarkably calm when things are at their worst. So when he fired Comey, staff found him incredibly calm. What it means here is very hard to tell, because Donald Trump has kind of been all over the map when it comes to these negotiations. It seems that he really does want to come to an agreement, which means that he's prepared to alienate his base, frankly, who elected him to a large extent on a very hardline immigration issue. But I'd be surprised if he relinquishes the wall, which is the biggest symbol of his presidency. Yeah, I would be.
I think that's the one thing that he doubled down on after that meeting yesterday. I mean,
that's
look
right.
At his Twitter feed right now.
That's right. That's why I said I'd be surprised if he relinquishes the wall. I think that's the one thing, the one symbol he has to hold on to.
Just want to nail that down.
Yeah.
Another clip now about earmarks, which you know what was driven out of Washington by Republicans in what, 6 years ago?
Right.
6, 7 years ago in 2011. Here's what he said on that.
Maybe you should start bringing back a concept of earmarks. It's going to bring you together. You're going to do it honestly. You're going to get rid of the problems that the other system had, and it did have some problems. But one thing it did is it brought everyone together.
It's an interesting political point to be made. How do Republicans greet that comment?
Well, it depends which kind of Republicans you're talking about. If it's the sort of go along to get along, rub shoulders in the smoky backfilled rooms, lobbyist Republicans, they really like hearing this, because earmarks are the treats and favors you can hand out to members to get them to support a bill. But I was getting phone calls from conservatives, principled conservative Republicans, who were very concerned to hear President Trump saying that. And they were trying to figure out who got in his ear, who told him to think about this stuff, because it came out of nowhere for a lot of people. And there's a lot of speculation that there must have been a conversation at Camp David, but I haven't nailed that down as to why President Trump came up with that.
We'll wait for more on that. Also, this release of a transcript. Dianne Feinstein, she did it unilaterally. It was not in coordination with Chuck Grassley, her Republican counterpart. This goes with Fusion GPS, Christopher Steele, and on and on and on. Here's the question I want answered, if we can now. Does the release of the transcript help us define more of that story today?
Honestly, my answer is no, because the two biggest or most surprising, sensational revelations in this testimony, if we believe it, are that A, a person was killed as a result of the release of this information, and B, that there was a mole inside the Trump campaign providing the FBI with information. Now, I'm quite skeptical of both claims. The first one seems a little convenient, given that if Fusion GPS was so worried about their sources, why were they sending this dossier to every media outlet in town trying to get them to report it? And then BuzzFeed ultimately did. And the point number two, as for the person inside the Trump campaign, we're already hearing, and again, these are unconfirmed reports, that that person may have been George Papadopoulos in his conversation with the Australian ambassador. So beyond that...
And that was bar talk, right?
Exactly.
In London over drinks.
And by the way, George Papadopoulos, not the most reliable narrator, a guy who has already been indicted for lying to the FBI. So I kind of, when I hear something that George Papadopoulos says, I don't exactly take it to the bank.
Jonathan, thank you. More on this coming up throughout the show today. Nice to have you on. Jonathan Swan from Axios working all that stuff today for us in Washington. Thanks, Sandra.
And a lot more coming up, Bill, over the course of a big 2 hours right here on America's Newsroom. House Homeland Security Committee Chairman Mike McCall joins us in just a few moments. And then at the top of the next hour, we will be speaking with the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristen Nielsen, is here. Both of them were in that fascinating meeting.
Yes, they were.
Yesterday. Yep. We want to know, Kristen Nielsen's made her viewpoints on the wall very clear. It is necessary to keep Americans safe. So what aren't Democrats getting about that?
She's very new to the job, too, so that's coming up next hour here. Mike McCall in a matter of minutes.
Plus, another big story that we're watching at this hour, weeks after devastating fires, heavy rains sending deadly mudslides rolling down the hills of Santa Barbara County, the areas of Montecito and Carpinteria getting the brunt of it. At least 15 people have been killed. 25 have been injured. Search and rescue operations are well underway. Mandatory evacuations remain in effect. Authorities say only an estimated 10 to 15% of folks actually heeded the warnings to get out. The mudslides also causing widespread power outages as power lines took massive damage through most of the county. Survivors waking up to a different landscape this morning.
It sounded like a freight train coming down the hill. You could hear these boulders rolling down. Yeah, the whole house was shaking.
Our fence is screwed, our garage is under mud. It's a nightmare.
Wake up and not be able to recognize what's going on behind you. This whole area used to be a road, not a huge riverbed, so it's been pretty crazy to wake up to.
County officials are focused on the job at hand, but they too will admit much of Santa Barbara County looks like a war zone.
It looked like a World War I battlefield. Huge boulders, rocks, downed trees, power lines, wrecked cars, lots of obstacles and challenges for rescue personnel to get to homes, let alone to get people out of them.
Unbelievable images coming out of there. At least 50 people had to be airlifted out by helicopters. Other officials describing it as all hell breaking loose. We will continue to track this story for you. William LaJeunesse will have a live report for us in just a moment.
It's remarkable what they're dealing with now. Meanwhile, here another big announcement from the White House. We're now hearing the president will take his America First agenda overseas yet again. So what's that all about? Maria Bartiromo on deck on that important trip coming up in a matter of minutes.
And South Korea says President Trump deserves, quote, big credit for the nation's first meeting with North Korea in years. Now, new details on who the administration is sending to head our delegation to the Olympic Games. Plus, there is this.
It fits this idea that the FBI was actively planning and orchestrating in a systematic way this idea we're going to generate stories that further our narrative and the plan we have.
So what is that all about? Republicans sounding off about all this newly released testimony that was given by the Fusion GPS founder, Glenn Simpson. The shocking claims he's making to Congress and how it furthers the story. Peter King out of New York is our guest on that, coming up in a matter of minutes.
Not to build the wall, but you need the wall. And I will tell you this, the ICE officers and the Border Patrol agents, I had them just recently up. They say if you don't have the wall, in certain areas, obviously, that aren't protected by nature, if you don't have the wall, you cannot have security. You just can't have it. It doesn't work. And part of the problem we have is walls and fences that we currently have are in very bad shape.
Well, that's President Trump now talking about immigration, insisting that southern border wall will be part of any deal on immigration. Texas Congressman Mike McCall, chairman of the House Homeland Security Committee, was in that meeting. Sir, how are you? And
doing fine.
Welcome back here. How many meetings have you been in with the president?
Several, but none quite like this one. I mean, You had live television cameras for over almost an hour covering very sensitive inside negotiations, and it really kind of peeled the curtain back for the American people to see what it's really like in Washington. I thought it was an extraordinary move by the president, leadership on his part, and I really thought he was at his best yesterday. It was
okay. So
phenomenal.
Was the content of the meeting different, or was it just the fact that the TV cameras were still there?
Well, everybody knows the camera's there, but I don't think it really changed people's thoughts and opinions at the meeting itself. I mean, I certainly raised my perspective. I think everybody else did. I think the good thing is that we came to an agreement on 4 pillars that had to be achieved in the short term before this DACA expiration in March. Border security, which would be the bill I passed out of my committee to not only build the wall, but bring technology, personnel, boots on the ground, and get this thing done. Once we have a real opportunity to get this done. I've been in for 7 terms. We've never been able to secure that border. So I am personally excited about that option. I think the chain migration, we've heard a lot about that issue. The visa lottery program, which is a random system, not merit-based, but totally random, I think needs to go. And Bill, you're in New York. You know, we had 2 terror attacks in New York that were really the product of these 2 failed immigration policies, that being chain migration and visa lottery. And that was a Halloween vehicle attack and then the suicide bomber in December. I think that, to protect the American people, needs to go. And then finally, the 4th pillar is we have to work out this DACA fix and codify it into law, because only Congress can do that. The Supreme Court held that the executive branch cannot. Okay, so I was writing down as I was going, and I think in the end, they divided those in 2, right? A phase 1 and a phase 2. And phase 1 would be you fix DACA and you get your border security, at least the money for it, then you move from there. And phase 2 would have to deal with the immigration system, and that's chain migration, the lottery. Is that the way it is defined by the commander-in-chief as well as you? Well, no, I think the consensus out of that meeting was the 4 pillars need to be addressed in the short term. I think this is our opportunity. If we're going to do DACA, the conservatives need to get what we need, and that's the security piece and the interior enforcement. And so that's what we're going to be working on. Chairman Goodlatte and I are introducing this morning a bill that will address these 4 pillars, and I think it's going to be sort of the landmark, you know, staking in the ground. The beginning of the negotiations will start with this bill. Okay, now it's a lot. It's a lot to cover. Can you get it done? Complicated. Look, anytime you touch immigration and you try to deal with border and immigration, it's a very, very difficult deal. But the difference is this: unlike President Obama, we have a commander-in-chief who is all in, who made that clear yesterday that he is all behind these efforts. He wants it to be bipartisan, bicameral. We're going to introduce a probably more conservative Republican bill, but the difference today is the political will in the White House to get this thing done, and therefore I am optimistic. Just one more question on this meeting. You're saying the television cameras had no effect on how you behaved or what you said, or how others reacted or what they said? And just to put a fine point on it, is this the way the president conducts every meeting he has? No, he doesn't. I was usually the cameras come in for about 5 minutes, and then they leave, and then there's a candid discussion. I was quite surprised the camera stayed there for an hour. No, I get that, but yeah, the way he conducts the meeting, is it the same with or without a camera? Oh, I think so. I think what you saw yesterday is the real deal. That's the real Donald Trump. And I think the more the American people see the real Donald Trump like he was yesterday, the more they're going to like him. I got it. Okay, fascinating stuff. Thank you for coming back, sir, very much, and we'll follow it as we move forward, all right? We'll watch your bill today. Michael McCall from Texas, there on the Hill. Thanks. Thanks.
Meanwhile, towards the end of that big meeting yesterday, the president also responded to rumors of a possible face-off between him and Oprah Winfrey in 2020. His reaction next.
You know, I did one of her last shows. She had Donald Trump, this is before politics, her last week. And she had Donald Trump, and my family was very nice. No, I like Oprah. I don't think she's going to run.
Fox News alert: the White House announcing President Trump will travel to Switzerland later this month to take his America First agenda to the World Economic Forum in Davos. He will be the first U.S. president to attend the summit since President Bill Clinton. Meanwhile, Republicans banking voters will soon see more money in their pockets thanks to tax reform. Let's bring in Maria Bartiromo, anchor of Mornings with Maria and Sunday Morning Futures. Good morning to you, Maria.
Good
welcome
to see
back.
you, Sandra. Thanks so much.
You've been traveling this week. So I love the way Politico sets this up. Coming soon to Davos, a Trump stink bomb. But they basically write exactly the kind of party Trump loves to crash. Why do you think he's going? And I don't know, is he going to kind of disrupt things in Davos?
You know, this is why I think the president's base loves him, because he's not afraid to go right in the face of anybody who's been doubting him or anybody who says they don't like what's going on in America, where this president is putting America first. So I don't know that he's trying to disrupt anything as much as he's basically saying, yeah, we're here, America is back, and we have a voice at the table. I love the op-ed in the Journal today, Davos in, Bannon out. So that's also sort of the kind of thinking that people are saying, wow, scratching their head, why would this president go? But I think it's a brilliant idea, actually.
You know, Larry Kudlow is weighing in this article, and he's saying, I think it's a brilliant move for the president to go. Look, this gives them an opportunity also, Maria, to tout this new 21% corporate tax rate.
That's right.
It hasn't been competitive, he argued, for so long in this country, and now it's much more competitive with other nations in the world.
I think it's a notion to say America is back. Look at this economy. Animal spirits are back. You saw M&A take off, business spending take off in the end of the year last year, and it's continuing. We've got predictions now of 4% economic growth in 2018. Why shouldn't the president go across the world and basically boast about his policies, making it happen here in America? So I do think it's a good idea. I also think it's a good idea for him to be seen with other heads of state with what he's trying to accomplish. He needs help on North Korea. He needs help on ISIS. He needs help on fighting terrorism. Why not get together with these allies across the world and try to come to some agreement on some of these big issues?
By the way, that 4% GDP growth that you're talking about, you spoke with Jamie Dimon this week. He hasn't always been a big fan of this president, but he's forecasting bigger growth.
He is. And remember, Sandra, a couple of years ago, I remember you and I talked about this, that he said, I'm a Democrat holding on by my fingernails, right? Because he was so angry with his party. But he's still a Democrat, but he recognizes that this tax plan is going to have a great cumulative effect in terms of economic growth longer term. Yesterday, he told me 4% growth is possible this year. Now we're talking about the Federal Reserve possibly raising interest rates by four times this year because of the growth. So, yeah, Jamie Dimon was all in on the president's tax reform package, saying that it's going to lead to jobs, exactly what the president wanted to hear.
Do you think the Americans are going to start to feel the effects of this come February, right?
That's what the president said.
Bigger?
February. But look, we're already feeling the effects. How many companies at the end of last year announced that they're going to pay $1,000 checks or bonuses? They're going to raise wages. Now, Jamie Dimon at JPM said that he's considering lots of things. They're going to be making an announcement in the next couple of weeks what they're going to do with the extra savings. But make no mistake, going from close to 40% corporate rate down to 21%, Sandra, you know, that's a big deal.
I've got to leave it there. Is consensus that this stock market keeps going higher, Maria?
Well, I think that there's no reason to expect a major sell-off. However, I will say this. Big story this morning. Bloomberg is reporting that there are Chinese officials that are saying treasuries do not look as attractive. China is one of the biggest acquirers of U.S. treasuries. That's why interest rates are higher today, and stocks will open lower in 2 minutes' time.
You are amazing, Maria Bartiromo. It's always good to have you on the program.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thank you, ladies. Closed door testimony now on the unverified Trump dossier, now out in the open. Senator Dianne Feinstein going against her Republican colleague. She went rogue. She argues the release was about setting the record straight. Is that the case? House Intel Committee member Peter King will react to that. Also, a live report on the deadly mudslides in Southern California, how some of these communities now are grappling with back-to-back natural disasters.
This is the worst I've ever seen. We thought the fire was terrible, and this is absolute devastation.
Now to these heavy rains. They've been rocking Santa Barbara County in California, and deadly mudslides killing 15 already. That number could go higher. Dozens have been injured. The landscape changed forever. William LaJeunesse live on the scene, Montecito, California. And what's happening there right before the sun comes up, William?
Well, Bill, you know, the Thomas fire that came through here, that burned for 4 weeks, 2 fatalities. The rains that brought this mudslide fell for less than 4 hours, 15 dead, and the sheriff expects more. With a fire, of course, you see it, you smell it. A mudslide comes without warning. By the time you do hear it, it is too late. Many remain unaccounted for. And the sheriff, he had fire. They had basically helicopters last night, high water trucks, trying to rescue those that are still trapped. People here never expected this, and neither did the Weather Service. We got almost 1 inch of rain in 15 minutes. The difference in the casualties, officials say, people obeyed the evacuation orders in the fire. Not in this case. Only 10% did. Many thought the threat was overblown.
Few people who didn't listen to the fire department when they told us to take every car off the street. So those few people, their cars were like annihilated. Power line was coming down, the cars were coming down, rolling.
You could hear the boulders rolling down the hill, you could hear the mud. I mean, it sounded like a freight train.
The debris flow snapped trees and power lines. It pushed homes off their foundations. It swept cars off the road. A child was found a half a mile away from his home. The sheriff, again, expects more fatalities today as they get through the areas. For those, about 300, I believe, are trying to be rescued in one particular area here in Montecito. So what about the fire? Well, you know, mudslides are not unique to California, but they're more common because of the wildfire season. Then we have that the very short rainy season. So when the fire goes through, basically that soil turns to kind of like a baby powder, and then underneath the fire really fuses the soil. So when the rains come, you literally get that mudslide effect, and it will literally destroy anything in its path.
Wow. And it has. William Longinus, thank you. We'll see what we get today there. Santa Barbara County, thank you.
Senator Dianne Feinstein unilaterally releasing testimony on that Trump dossier from Fusion GPS co-founder Glenn Simpson. Feinstein doing this against the wishes of her Republican colleagues. The California Democrat says, quote, the innuendo and misinformation circulating about the transcript are part of a deeply troubling effort to undermine the investigation into potential collusion and obstruction of justice. The only way to set the record straight is to make the transcript public. Let's bring in New York Congressman Peter King. It's a member of the House Intelligence Committee. He is a member of the House Intelligence Committee, and we're glad he's here this morning on this news. What did you make as all of this came out?
Well, first of all, I have no idea why Dianne Feinstein did that. It proved absolutely nothing. Generally, when an investigation is going on, you do keep it secret so that other witnesses don't know what someone else is saying. But no one was being kept away from anyone here. The fact is the Trump dossier has so far been absolutely nothing. There's nothing to it at all. In fact, nothing's been verified. You know, the one major charge that was in there was that Donald Trump's lawyer, Michael Cohen, had secret meetings with KGB operatives in Czechoslovakia. Well, it turns out he's never been in Czechoslovakia in his life, never met with any Soviet operatives or Russian operatives. There's also even some allegation that his wife was somehow involved with Russia. The fact is, she left Ukraine 40 years ago and has never set foot in Russia. And interestingly enough, at the hearing, we had Michael Cohen for about 8 hours testifying before our committee. And the only time we thought maybe he was in trouble was when they found some reference to Michael Cohen and hacking. And right away we thought this must involve the Democratic National Committee. Turned out he had been involved in the taxi cab business years ago. And obviously in New York, hack is a term for taxi cab. So, but I'm just saying that there's nothing in that dossier that proves anything. There's nothing significant at all that's been verified. And to this date, as far as I know, and I've been in most of the meetings, there has not been one instance showing any collusion whatsoever with the Donald Trump campaign and Russia. Nothing at all.
I want to share with our audience one of the unverified claims in all of this. Simpson's attorney saying, quote, he wants to be very careful to protect his sources. Attorney Josh Levy said this during the August 22nd Senate Judiciary Committee interview of his client. Somebody's already been killed as a result of the publication of this dossier, and no harm should come to anybody related to this honest work, Congressman.
Yeah, first of all, I don't know who he's talking about. Secondly, at the time that this apparently this killing that they're talking about occurred. The only one who had been releasing the dossier was Fusion GPS itself. They were leaking it out to reporters before the election in an attempt to hurt Donald Trump. So if somebody was killed because of it, it's not because of anyone on the Republican side or anyone involved with Donald Trump. Secondly, it's sort of a sensational charge. Again, nothing to back it up. And that's been the whole story of Fusion GPS and the Trump dossier. There's nothing to back anything up. They make all of these very serious charges, by the way, and yet when you look at it, there's virtually nothing there and nothing of significance and nothing to show collusion. I find it really shameful. We've spent over a year now on an investigation which is coming up with nothing. Now, listen, maybe Bob Mueller has something that we don't know about, but I've been at testimony after testimony after testimony of all these witnesses, and so far there's been no evidence of any collusion shown whatsoever.
Jim Jordan came on Fox News last night, and he shared what he thought was the most interesting thing to come out of all of this. Watch.
What I found most interesting about what I've been able to read thus far is the fact that Glenn Simpson said Christopher Steele told him the FBI had another source. How did Christopher Steele know that? Did the FBI tell him? And if they did, why is the FBI telling Christopher Steele, the guy who was paid by Fusion, who was paid by the Clinton campaign, why is the FBI telling Christopher Steele they got another source on this whole Russian investigation? I think that is interesting and something we need to get to the bottom of.
And if I may, Congressman, move on to what Simpson said in this transcript, telling investigators it was his understanding that the FBI, saying, quote, they believed Chris's information might be credible because they had other intelligence that indicated the same thing. And one of those pieces of intelligence was a human source from inside the Trump organization. Simpson said of the FBI, Congressman.
I can tell you we've seen no evidence of that whatsoever. The FBI has certainly Director Comey would lay out to us evidence they thought they had. There was no talk of a source at all. If they're talking about Papadopoulos, he wasn't even interviewed by the FBI until I think January or February of 2017. And of course, he was such a low operative in the Trump campaign. There's no evidence that he did anything that involved collusion or that was brought back to the United States. So why the whole FBI involvement with Christopher Steele raises a lot of questions, and that's one of the things that's the subject of our investigation.
Congressman, clearly you are in line with your Republican colleagues, and you are outraged over all of this. And Chuck Grassley has shared his strong feelings, and he says that this harms the committee's investigation. Does it?
It does, because generally you don't want information coming out as it goes along, because then other witnesses can tailor their testimony to what they hear. Just like Bob Mueller is not disclosing publicly what he's getting from people he's interviewing. You try to keep that a close hold so that people can tailor their testimony to that. So no, but this whole thing is just again, it gets worse by the day. And listen, people can have honest differences with Donald Trump. They can disagree with his Russia policy. But to talk about collusion, you're basically saying that a presidential campaign was involved in treasonous conduct. And to base it on this flimsy dossier, which is totally unverified and can't be proved at all, and has been disproven, to me is a disgrace.
And as we know, the president and his attorneys are moving forward with defamation suits against Fusion GPS, Glenn Simpson, over this dossier. Congressman Peter King, always good to see you. Thanks for coming on this morning.
Right, Senator, thank you.
Breaking news overnight, South Korea, why they say President Trump deserves big credit for that big meeting with the North. As we learn who will be leading our U.S. delegation for the Olympics next month. Stay tuned for that.
Plus, former White House chief strategist Steve Bannon losing his job at Breitbart after his feud with the White House. We will have more on that for you coming up.
And which Fire and Fury book are you reading?
Good question.
Check it twice, because there's a twist.
No, it ain't me, babe. It ain't me you're looking for, babe.
The new book, Fire and Fury, cannot stay on the shelves. But unfortunately for Michael Wolff, the author, a lot of folks are out there buying the wrong book, as it turns out. One with a similar title, but about a different kind of fire and fury. The book, Fire and Fury, the Allied Bombing of Germany, seeing a massive uptick in sales on Amazon. The author of this book says he's not complaining one bit.
Not at all.
Said he hasn't seen this kind of attention since the book was released.
Straight to the bank.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Make sure you're buying the right book.
Details. All right, this breaking overnight. South Korea's leader now saying President Trump deserves big credit for sparking the talks with North Korea. Wow. Meanwhile, Vice President Pence, Second Lady Karen Pence, will lead U.S. delegation in South Korea for the Winter Games next month. Michael Waltz, retired Green Beret commander, former counterterrorism advisor to Vice President Dick Cheney. How you doing, Michael? And Happy New Year to you, sir.
Hey, Happy New Year, Bill.
Credit to President Trump for driving the two sides together. This has been debated. Where do you think the credit lies?
Well, I think President Moon of South Korea is absolutely right. For all the criticism of President Trump for not engaging in diplomacy, we've had multiple rounds of UN sanctions with the Chinese and Russians on board. We had the Chinese announce at the UN, unprecedented instructions to its banks to stop doing business. But we also know that the Chinese, kind of behind the scenes, aren't fully enforcing the sanctions, and President Trump has made it, in no uncertain terms, known that they need to crack down, they need to get on board, and the Chinese need to take care of this, or we will. That said, it's not only President Moon of South Korea, it's Kim Jong-un of North Korea, who said in his New Year's Day speech to the North Korean people that they are facing their harshest ever sanctions. He warned them to brace themselves, and it's in that speech that then he reached out an olive branch to South Korea to sit down over the Olympics.
I got it. Okay, now we tied all that together. The U.S. is concerned, they've expressed concerns anyway, that North Korea is trying to drive a wedge between our relationship and Seoul.
Yeah.
How big of a concern should that be?
Well, it's not only the U.S. is concerned, conservatives in South Korea are concerned. North Korea has a long history of dialing up pressure, and right when it gets to, their kind of pain threshold and they start feeling the pain, then they step back, extend an olive branch, sit down for talks, and buy time. That's what they've done for 30 years, and it's one of the reasons where we are where we are. So I'm all for everyone taking a pause in the Olympics. Actually, the North Koreans and South Koreans have a long history. They marched together in the 2000 games and the 2004 games. Their athletes actually marched together in the opening. But the day after, we have to resume military exercise, and we have to resume pressure. This maximum pressure campaign is the only way, and it's on China as much as it is on North Korea, that I think we're going to see a non-military resolution to this thing.
You make some great points there. A non-military resolution. Okay, optimism I hear. North Korea responded by saying, look, our nuclear weapons, they're not aimed at you, Seoul, South Korea.
Yeah.
They're not aimed at China. They're not aimed at Russia. It's only at the U.S. In return, the U.S. has now announced the approval of $133 million for anti-ballistic missiles to be shipped to Japan. Tie those two together, Michael.
Well, so this is the North Korean wedge strategy. Their lead negotiator said to everybody in the region, you don't need to worry about us. It's only the United States that has to worry. So that point one is that's why we have to stop this program before it can get off the launch pad. But point two, what they're trying to do is say we can sit down with talks. They're appealing to Korean nationalism, and they're trying to drive a wedge between the United States and South Korea. President Moon from South Korea is a progressive. He's from the liberal wing of South Korean politics, and they desperately want some type of resolution. What I'm concerned about is after the Olympics, if we start having talks about extending aid, resuming trade, resuming industrial programs in the North again, that once again the North Koreans are going to use to buy time. All they need at this point is for their engineers to be able to have their warhead re-enter the atmosphere on an ICBM, and they've crossed the finish line.
Well, they're buying time right now.
That's right.
Whether we like it or not. Michael, thank you for your time. Terrific insight there. Michael Waltz there in Washington, D.C. Thank you, Sara.
Brand new reaction coming in from the White House after a federal judge blocks President Trump's plan to phase out the Dreamers program, or DACA. Moments from now, we will get brand new reaction from Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kristen Nielsen. She will be here live.
Also, devastation in Puerto Rico from Hurricane Maria, now spreading to hospitals nationwide. The emergency shortage they're trying to deal with. Coming up in a moment right here.
I've been there. I've been that cancer patient in the chair who's needed it. And it's so not fair to them.
House Majority Whip Steve Scalise is undergoing another surgery today. This is part of his recovery from last June's shooting at a baseball practice. Man, he has been through so much. He did not provide many details about the procedure today, but he did say he plans to remain fully engaged in his work as he recovers. Steve Scalise saying that yesterday that he's made tremendous progress, and indeed he has. So good luck.
So
hang in there. Right on. Stay tough.
The U.S. facing a nationwide shortage of IV fluids stemming from the hurricane damage to medical product manufacturing in facilities like the ones in Puerto Rico. Healthcare advocates now pleading with the FDA to find a solution as hospital workers battle a nasty flu season. Matt Finn is live from our Chicago bureau. A saline shortage is critical to doctors and patients. What's being done, Matt?
Well, Sandra, medical professionals and doctors say saline is one of the first things they reach for to keep people alive.
Trauma center, a shortage of saline is dire. It's the very first thing that we give to the patients when they come in from a gunshot or a motor vehicle accident. They've had a loss of blood, and we immediately have to bulk it back up and give them the fluids.
The majority of America's largest saline bag manufacturers happen to be in Puerto Rico, and since Hurricane Maria, there's been a severe nationwide shortage of saline bags and IV fluid. The FDA is working to get that corrected. One of America's largest manufacturers, Baxter, reports its 3 plants are now back online in Puerto Rico, but it could be some time before production is fully restored. Until then, hospitals and clinics are struggling with the saline shortage. We spoke to one clinic in California that says it has enough saline to get through February, and then after that, it's unknown. Sandra.
Matt, we understand that hospitals and clinics are forced to decide which patients then get saline bags and when.
Yeah, these clinics and hospitals are put in a tight spot, forced to decide who gets saline and when. And, it says that they have to decide between people who are urgent and then people who are getting some routine care. And then nurses ultimately have to stand over patients for up to 30 minutes, wasting critical time injecting fluid manually. And one woman we spoke to who gets monthly infusions says she got her infusion last month without the required saline.
I've had even friends and family members say, what's the big deal? It's, it's saline. It's, but they don't realize unless you live it, you need it. That's going to help you from being so nauseous or having a reaction or having terrible headaches.
That woman says going forward, she has a guilt trip because if she does get a saline bag, she wonders if there's a cancer patient or someone in the ER across the hall who needs the bag more than her. Sandra.
Matt Finn, well, what a story. Thank you for following it for us.
Well, best of all of them. Certainly top story of the day. Back to that now, a judge striking down President Trump's decision on DACA as he gets ready to strike a deal on immigration. Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen is our guest live. She will answer